The classical variation is one of the most common variations that can arise in the French defense. In this video, we will be starting our coverage by taking a look at one of the most popular variations in the classical variation, involving the early development of the bishop to g5 by white on move 4. I really hope you will enjoy it. So, as I mentioned in my introductory video for the French defense, after e4, e6, d4, d5, the move knight to c3 is one of the most common moves at white's disposal, because it protects the e4 pawn and also increases the pressure on the d5 pawn. And now black has several options at their disposal, but the move knight to f6, which leads to the so-called classical variation, will be the move of interest for the next few videos. And now once again, white has a few options. The move e5 is the main one, leading to the so-called Steinitz variation of the French defense. But this move, bishop to g5, also has the right to exist. Curiously enough, this move doesn't have a name in itself, or this variation doesn't have a name of itself yet, but it can lead to several variations that do. So what is the idea behind this move? Well, the idea is twofold. Obviously, you are increasing the pressure on the knight on f6 and pinning it to the queen. So you are indirectly defending the d5 pawn. And your idea is to either capture this knight and then capture on d5, or to play e5 because now this is a legitimate threat. And now black has several options at their disposal, which will be the subject of the next few videos. So the first move is the move bishop to e7, simply dealing with this pin. The other move is the move bishop to b4, counter-pinning and playing in a very sharp and counter-attacking style, leading to the so-called McCutcheon variation. And black can also play d takes e4, relieving the pressure in the center, leading to the so-called burn variation. But before we get to these moves, which are more theoretical and more complicated, of course, we need to ask ourselves, okay, but how bad it is if black really tries to clarify the matters immediately and play a move like h6, hitting the bishop away. And if you play this variation as white, you kind of need to know this move. It is not the most popular move at the club level, and for reasons we will very soon see, but it is a move that was played in some very high-profile games, and that can be faced as a surprise weapon. So you kind of need to know what you are doing, or at least understand the main ideas behind 4 bishop g5. So obviously the black is trying to clarify the position of the bishop, and if we go back, they might even consider going g5 and then taking the pawn on e4. But this is not the idea behind our move. We want to play bishop to f6. That was the sole point of playing bishop to g5 in the first place. And the reason for this capture is that now we are having some pressure against the d5 pawn. So you are taught as a beginner that you shouldn't move the bishops too early, and that you shouldn't give them up for knights for no reason. But if there is a very direct, very tangible benefit to be gained from this, then it is indeed a viable approach. And here black is in a sort of a conundrum, because if they try to keep the protection of the d5 pawn with the queen and take with g takes f6, an idea that is viable in some cases in the French defense, here this is just bad, because we can play e d5, either winning a pawn or forcing black to play e d5 themselves, which leaves them with these two isolated pawns of the f file, and also with this pawn on h file, which is also isolated. So now they have 3 pawn islands, or groups of pawns, as they are known, whereas we have 2. And this leads to a very significant structural advantage for white. So for example, after some queen to f3 move, increasing the pressure on d5 and preparing long castling, white not only does have 2 pieces in play compared to black none, white also has a very big structural advantage, which is more than enough to compensate for the absence of the bishop pair, and white is significantly better in this position. And this is why it's not good for black to capture on f6 with the pawn. And what black players more commonly do, they take with the queen. And this is of course better than taking with the pawn, and it was actually played by some strong players, most notably Nodirbek Abdusattorov, former World Rapid chess champion and one of the most promising and talented juniors out there, and by a very strong German grandmaster Matthias Blaubaum, who is rated I think 2600 plus or something along those lines. Of course, once again, this is a line that is very likely to, or more likely to be encountered on a high level, not on club level, but for the sake of completeness, I decided to cover it. It needs to be covered. So of course, we have to the pawn on d5 now, because otherwise the whole operation was meaningless. We have just given up a bishop pair for nothing. And here, of course, black doesn't yet recapture here, but they play this move bishop to b4, pinning this knight, preparing to castle quick, and trying to gain a big lead in development. For example, if we play d takes e6 now, trying to like preserve our pawn, then bishop to e6 comes with a tempo, so we allow the bishop to develop with a tempo, and now black has 3 pieces in play. They have a bishop pair in an open position, and they are significantly better, or okay, not better, but they definitely have compensation for the pawn. Which is why the better move here is to simply continue developing and play bishop to c4, protecting the d5 pawn, because if we don't do anything now due to this pin, e d5 is indeed a threat. So we play bishop to c4, preserving the tension between these 2 pawns and simply developing another piece. And this ability to preserve the tension and not exchange at every immediate opportunity is one of those skills that distinguishes higher rated players from lower rated players. So this is tendency or mechanism in chess that you could add to your repertoire. So after bishop to c4, what black does, black plays castles. Once again, they are inviting us to take on e6. They don't want to take themselves, because then we would play bishop to d5 and kinda everything is covered. So what black does first, they are castling short, preparing to bring this rook into the game to d8, and still inviting us to take this pawn on e6, which would accelerate their development. And once again, it is better here not to budge and just to continue developing with knight g2 e2, preparing to castle quickly. One of the most common mistakes at lower levels is not taking care of the safety of your king, so there is no reason to help black develop the initiative by letting them get more pieces into play. We already have 1 extra pawn, and our pawn is protected. So taking on e6 wouldn't win us another pawn, so there's no reason to do it. So after knight g2 e2, now black has only one sensible move, e d5, opening some lines, and also opening this diagonal for this bishop. And after bishop to d5, rook to d8 is the idea, hitting this bishop and also the pawn behind it, because now this protector of this bishop is pinned to the king. And here we have to castle. If we play any move like h3 or something, then rook to d5 just loses a piece. And now, after castle, this is the culminating moment, or the critical moment. So, at first glance, we are very, very solid because everything is harmonious. But you can notice that there is some hidden pressure on this d4 pawn. And black's best approach is to try to win this pawn back. Because otherwise, if we manage to consolidate, say, by moving these bishops or something, we will just have an extra pawn. And also, this bishop is kind of exerting a relatively annoying pressure on the queen side. So the main move here is bishop to c3, and that's kind of the only move worth considering. And now, of course, we can't recapture with the pawn and keep this pawn protected because we would lose the bishop again. So we have to take with the knight, keeping the bishop protected. And now, you might be wondering, okay, black can simply win the pawn back with c6, but that would actually be very much into white's favor, because we would retreat the bishop to b3, a bit more active diagonal now that c6 has been played. If you play bishop to f3, you are kind of restricted by these pawns. So bishop to b3, rook to d4, and now queen to e2. And you might be wondering, okay, isn't black just equal? Well, if you take a look at the position, the time that black spent to recapture this pawn was time wasted for not developing the pieces. So now we have a position where we have 3 pieces in play, where our rooks are already connected, and where black hasn't yet developed fully. And even though the structure is symmetrical, even though there are no clear weaknesses on either side, due to this piece activity and the lead in development, white is clearly better. So we have the ideas of playing knight to e4, rook a to d1, and black still needs to do something to complete development while we can continue improving our pieces. This is once again another very kind of tricky concept to grasp at lower levels, but you don't need to have anything direct or concrete or obvious to have an advantage. Sometimes winning chess games consist of simply having better placed pieces and then improving them further until the opponent's position cracks or they make mistake under the pressure. So that is why the only move that was played here is actually knight to c6, increasing the pressure on this d4 pawn. And here the sequence is bishop to c6, so we have to deal with this pressure, and we play bishop takes c6, b takes c6, and now knight to e4, either hitting the queen and forcing her to take on d4, or trying to improve the knight, maybe getting it to c5 or something along those lines. And now black is basically forced to take on d4. If they retreat the queen to e7, we already might have like rook to e1, and everything is protected. So queen to d4 is a must. And now after queen to d4, sorry, not queen to d4, c3, even smarter move, exploiting this weakness of the back rank, because if queen to e4, we have queen to d8. So if we play c3, queen to d1, rook f to d1, we have a very nice endgame, or slightly better endgame. This was all seen in a very high-profile game between Levon Aronian and Nodirbek Abdusattorov. White has a very stable advantage due to these weaknesses in the pawn structure. Once again, black has doubled pawns, 3-pawn islands, and we have better structure. The bishop is nominally a bit better than the knight in these types of positions, because the board is open and pawns are on the both sides of the board, which allows bishop to, because bishop is a long-ranged piece and can influence both sides of the board simultaneously, but this advantage of the bishop doesn't compensate for the weakened pawns. And this is, very typical for, let's say, grandmaster level. Top players often, are ready to risk variations where if their opponent knows everything, they end up in a slightly inferior endgame, and then they have to defend it, because at top level, a draw with black is more than okay. But for club level, this is not very appealing, and I think it is a good sign for bishop g5 players to get such a position, because this is like the best case scenario black can get, and I don't think that many players at lower levels at club level would be that happy to obtain this position out of the opening, which is why after 4 bishop to g5, the move h6 is not the popular, and all the other alternatives which we will examine in the next videos are by far more common. So this brings me to the end of this introductory video devoted to the 4 bishop g5 line of the classical variation. As usual, the material covered in this video is available for free in the Lichess study and for download on my blog. It is fully annotated PGN file. Both links are provided below the video in the video description. Now, I do want to mention one thing in related to the availability of my public material. So, even though I have decided before I started or reactivated this channel to emulate Lichess business model and to make the majority of my content for free and to rely primarily on donations and public support, I did feel it is a little bit okay and, not too greedy to have at least part of my content kinda exclusive or locked behind the paywall or available to the more hardcore subscribers or supporters of the channel. So in the first few openings video, including this one, it will be the material will be fully available, it will be annotated, but I will use this as a sample in the future, and for future videos at some point, I think after first 5 PGNs, I will be only start providing bare PGN without any comments. So they will be available publicly for free, while annotated PGNs will be available to the supporters of the channel. I'm not yet 100% decided how I want to implement it, but most likely it will be some monthly subscription, probably on Buy Me a Coffee for, I think, reasonable fee. So I'm thinking something like $10, and you gain all of my annotated PGNs not for free, but in return, for a reasonable fee. So yeah, I just wanted to be transparent about that decision and manage expectations at the very start. I kind of hope you understand it, and I think it's fair to be partly compensated or put some valuable things behind the paywall, as long as it's reasonable, not too greedy, and the work put into these files is valuable and brings something, so it's not charging for thin air. So yeah, in any case, I would like to thank you for watching these videos. I really hope you found this one useful and informative. And if you have any feedback, either related to my presentation, to the video form, or anything else, to my business model, to the content, please do let me know. What opening would you like me to cover next? Whatever, please don't hesitate to comment below. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check some other videos on the channel. And if not, well, I will be seeing you in one of the next videos or opening videos, where we will be continuing the coverage of the classical variation by checking some of the other options available to black on move 4 following 4 bishop g5. Thanks for watching again, and see you soon.